The morning I decided to leave, the house was strangely quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that comes after a storm. When even walls seemed to hold their breath, I stood in the kitchen, holding the same cracked cup I'd used for 30 years. The steam from the tea rose like ghosts of laughter, of birthdays, of the little boy who once said, "Mama, I'll take care of you forever." But forever ended last night. My son, my only son, looked me in the eyes and said words that carved deep into my bones. "You're becoming a burden. Ma, you don't understand our life anymore. We need space." He didn't shout. He didn't even look angry. He said it like he was saying something practical, as if love could be measured in square feet. My daughter-in-law stood behind him, her eyes darting away, her hand resting protectively on the baby bump I once prayed for. And in that moment, I realized I had become an inconvenience in my own home. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ticking clock felt like a heartbeat counting down the moments until my exit. I packed quietly, my shawl, my old rosary, and the photo of my husband. By dawn, I slipped out the door without a sound. No one stirred, not my son, not his wife, not even the dog that used to wait for me by the kitchen door. But as I walked down that empty road, a strange calm filled my chest. He thought losing me would bring him peace. He was wrong, because the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was punishment. Love, it's a strange thing. It builds a home, raises walls, fills them with laughter, and one day, it quietly walks out unnoticed. As I sat on the wooden bench outside the old train station, I kept replaying my son's face in my mind. The same face that once lit up when I'd bring him mango slices in summer. Now it was the face of a man too tired to remember love's weight. The wind was cold, biting through my thin shawl, but my heart burned warmer than ever, not from anger, but from memory, because a mother never stops loving, even when her heart is broken. Her love continues to feed the very hands that pushed her away. When the tea seller passed by, I asked for a small cup. He looked at me and said softly, "You remind me of Miami." I smiled. "Then give her my salam, son." He nodded, not realizing he had already healed a small crack in my chest. As I sipped that tea, I thought about love, how it never truly disappears. It just changes its home. I may not live in my son's house anymore, but I still lived in his heartbeat. He didn't know it yet, but one day, he would feel it. In the quiet moments. In the rooms that suddenly felt too big. In the meals that tasted like guilt, because the love of a mother doesn't die. It lingers. It haunts. It forgives, and sometimes it returns. At first, my absence felt like relief to him. No morning lectures about prayers. No questions about dinner. No old songs playing in the background while I cooked. For a few days, my son thought he had finally achieved peace. He told his wife. Now the house feels lighter, but soon, the silence began to grow teeth. The laughter they tried to fill the rooms but didn't echo the same. The food she cooked tasted bland, no matter how much spice she added in the house. The house began to look unfamiliar, as if it to miss the sound of my slippers brushing across the floor. At night, he would wake up to strange noises, the ticking clock, the swaying curtains, the soft creak of the chair I always sat on. He tried to ignore it, but the mind has a cruel way of replaying guilt in the dark. One evening, when he returned from work, he saw my favorite shawl still hanging by the door, the one I used every winter. He reached to remove it, but his hand froze. For the first time, he realized he didn't want to. That small piece of fabric had become the last thread of warmth in that cold, beautiful house. Meanwhile, miles away, I had changed too. The pain that once consumed me had softened into quiet strength. I started helping at a small orphanage, feeding children, mending clothes, telling them stories of a boy who once called me his whole world. And as I watched those children smile, something shifted inside me. Maybe love was never meant to stay trapped inside one home. Maybe the change was God's way of giving me a new one. Guilt has a slow poison. It doesn't kill you instantly. It crawls under your skin, hides behind smiles, and whispers in the middle of the night, "You did her wrong." My son began to hear that whisper. One evening, as he sat at the dinner table, his wife spoke without looking up. "I invited my mother to move in with us. She'll help with the baby." He froze. Her mother? The woman who once told me I should let young people live freely. It was as if fate wanted him to taste the very bitterness he'd served me within a week. Her mother moved in, rearranging my kitchen, changing the curtains I chose, and filling the silence I left behind. But this time, it wasn't love that filled the house. It was command. She criticized everything from how he dressed to how late he returned from work. The same house that once felt lighter now felt like a prison cell. My son tried to complain, but his wife snapped, "You never said that when my mother took care of your child. Don't be ungrateful." Ungrateful. The word sliced him open. Because suddenly, he heard my voice echoing from the past. "Beta, when you have your own home. Never make someone feel like they're in the way. He looked around the table. At the woman who no longer smiled at him. At the house that no longer felt like his. At the emptiness that love had turned into. That night, he went to his room and wept, not for himself, but for the woman who had once loved him enough to leave. The betrayal wasn't that his wife replaced me. The real betrayal was that he had replaced love with pride. Silence has its own voice. It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It just waits until guilt finally grows loud enough to be heard. Weeks passed. My son stopped sleeping well. He'd wake up to the sound of the wind brushing against the window, and swear he heard my bangles clinking in the kitchen. He'd rush there, only to find darkness, and that same old shawl still hanging by the door. He wanted to call me. So many times he picked up the phone. But pride is a heavy thing. It presses on the heart until words can't escape. Meanwhile, the house began to change its rhythm. The laughter faded first, then the conversation shortened. And then, nothing. He'd come home from work and find his wife too tired to talk, her mother busy giving orders, and the child crying without reason. Even the baby seemed restless, as if feeling something missing, something warm, something soft, something motherly. Every night, the silence in that house grew louder. It wasn't the kind that brings peace. It was the kind that drips guilt from every corner, reminding you of what you threw away. One night, unable to take it anymore, he whispered to himself, "Ma, can you hear me?" And for the first time in his life, he realized silence could answer, not with words, but with emptiness, the kind that wraps around your soul until you can't breathe. Some silences heal, others haunt. And his was beginning to break him from the inside out. There comes a point when regret is no longer a feeling. It becomes a shadow that follows you everywhere. My son had reached that point. He began waking before dawn. Sitting by the window, where I once placed his morning tea, he'd stare at the street, half hoping I would appear with my old shawl and that familiar, forgiving smile. But the road remained empty. The warmth he once took for granted had vanished, leaving behind a house full of noise but no life. The baby cried constantly now. His wife was exhausted. Her mother's sharp tongue only made the walls colder. Every argument ended with the same words: "If your mother had raised you better, you'd know how to be a man." And that was the wound that cut the deepest. He started skipping meals, losing focus at work. His colleagues noticed the change, the dull eyes, the tremor in his voice. But how could he explain that he was haunted not by ghosts, but by memories? At night, he'd hear the faint echo of my laugh, the rhythm of my old slippers against the floor, and every sound whispered the same truth. He had broken something sacred. Meanwhile, far away, I was struggling to. The orphanage was full of love. But it wasn't my love. Every child I hugged reminded me of the one I lost, not to death, but to pride. And though I tried to fill my days with purpose, a small part of my heart still waited for the door to open, for a voice to say, "Ma, come home." But neither of us spoke, because sometimes the hardest struggle isn't between two people. It's between forgiveness and pain. It happened one ordinary morning, the kind that begins quietly but ends with a truth you can't run from. My son woke to the smell of burnt toast. His wife had forgotten it in the toaster, while rocking the crying baby. Her mother shouted from the other room, complaining about everything: the noise, the mess, the thankless life she now lived. He sat there, watching them, and for the first time, he saw his house for what it had become, a battlefield without love. The silence between him and his wife wasn't normal anymore. It was distance wearing a wedding ring, and the emptiness around him felt heavier than ever. Then he saw it, the old photo frame still sitting on the shelf. It was covered in dust. The picture inside slightly faded, me, holding him as a child. Both of us smiling like the world could never touch us. He picked it up with trembling hands. And that's when it hit him, all the love, the peace, the warmth he missed. It hadn't vanished by chance, he had driven it away. He whispered to the photo, "You were never a burden, Ma." I was. The realization cracked something open inside him. All the pride that once kept him from dialing my number now turned to ash. That evening, without saying a word to anyone, he walked out of the house. No bag, no phone, no plan, just guilt and a mother's memory leading his way. Every step felt heavier, not because of the miles, but because of the years he had lost. He didn't know where I was, but he knew one thing for sure. He was finally ready to find me, not as a son seeking forgiveness, but as a man seeking peace. Fate has a way of guiding lost souls home, not through maps, but through memories. For days my son searched. He visited every old street, every familiar corner, where I once walked him to school. He spoke to neighbors, shopkeepers, even the postman who used to bring me letters from relatives long gone. Most shook their heads sadly. She left quietly, never came back. But one woman, old, frail, sitting outside a bakery, looked up at him with knowing eyes. "You're her boy, aren't you? The one she cried for, Even when she smiled, he froze. Tears gathered before he could answer. She pointed toward the edge of town. There's an orphanage by the church. She helps the children there. Go before evening prayers, she never misses them. He ran for the first time in years. His heart raced not with anger, but with hope. Meanwhile, I sat in the orphanage garden, braiding a little girl's hair, humming an old lullaby. The air smelled of rain. Something in my chest felt heavy, as if the wind carried a name I hadn't heard in forever. Then I saw him, standing by the gate, trembling, breathless, older, yet still my boy for a second. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when he whispered, "Ma," the world fell silent. I didn't move at first. Years of hurt don't vanish in a heartbeat. But then I saw the regret in his eyes, raw, real, human. And before I knew it, I was holding him, my tears mixing with his. No words. No explanations. Just the sound of two broken hearts remembering how to be together again. Because sometimes, the return isn't just about coming home. It's about finding love that never really left. Forgiveness doesn't come wrapped in words, it arrives in silence. In the trembling hands that dare to hold again. That evening, the sky was painted in soft gold and the church bells began to ring. The children at the orphanage laughed in the distance, their joy echoing like tiny blessings. I sat beside my son on the old wooden bench under the neem tree, the same one where I often prayed for him. Even when he had forgotten me, for a long time, neither of us spoke. The air was thick with everything that had been left unsaid, the years of distance, the cold nights, the unanswered prayers. Finally, he turned to me. His voice cracked like a confession. "Ma, I don't deserve to be here." I looked at him, really looked. The once proud boy who couldn't bear to share space with his aging mother now looked smaller, humbled by his own heart. I smiled faintly. "And yet, here you are." Tears slipped down his face as he took my hands. "I thought success meant living without help. Without you. But now I see, I was never strong. I was just lost." I placed my hand over his. "Beta, mothers don't stop loving when they're hurt. We only wait for the day our children learn what love truly costs." For the first time in years, he rested his head on my lap. The same lap that once held his childhood dreams now held his repentance. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows that felt like the past finally leaving. In that quiet, I whispered a prayer, not for punishment, not for revenge, but for peace. Because forgiveness isn't forgetting the pain. It's choosing to love anyway. And that evening, as the wind brushed through the leaves, I forgave him, not because he asked, but because my heart couldn't hold anger anymore. Some echoes never fade, they linger in the walls, in the air, in the hearts of those who once ignored them. After that evening of forgiveness, life began to shift, quietly, gently, like sunlight slipping through a cracked window. My son returned to his home, but he returned changed. Every step he took carried the weight of lessons learned the hard way. Every word he spoke carried respect, love, and humility. He started noticing things he once ignored, the warmth in a shared meal, the power of a simple thank you, the comfort of a mother's smile. He learned that love isn't just a memory to revisit when convenient. It is a living, breathing force, one that shapes the home, the heart, and even the soul. And I discovered something too. Even in absence, a mother's love echoes farther than distance. It shapes those who listen, even if they refuse to hear it first. Months later, I returned to my own house, not to reclaim it, but to walk through its halls and whisper blessings into rooms that had once felt cold. I left my mark not in anger, not in punishment, but in the quiet echo of love that refused to be silenced. My son followed me. This time, he did not rush, did not demand. He simply walked beside me, letting the past settle like dust, while the future waited, bright, uncertain, yet filled with possibility. And as I looked at him, I realized echoes are not only reminders of what was lost, they are lessons. Warnings. Guides. The echo of love can reach farther than hate. It can forgive what seems unforgivable, and it can rebuild what was thought broken beyond repair. Because a mother's love, even when pushed away, ignored, or betrayed, never truly leaves. It waits. It whispers. It echoes. And in its echo, we all find our way home.